before I gotta start the landmark stuff.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the May 8th, 2025 Landmarks Commission meeting. It's nice to see everyone in person and also virtually online. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio Open Meeting Law and Section 101.2021 of the Codified Ordinance of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by roll call vote. Recusal from any case due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the beginning of the presentation. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, virtual attendants will use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile versions and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking the hand icon again and muting your microphone. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter submitted through the proper channels have been considered. The proper channels for communication are sending an email to the landmark@clevelandohio.gov email address with a comment or letter, calling and or leaving a message at 216-664-2532, or sending a letter or dropping off comments at City Hall located at 601 Lakeside Avenue, Suite 519. Communication with members of this body must follow proper channels for consideration. Any comments received by the stated deadline will be collected by Landmark staff and disseminated to the commission members prior to the scheduled meeting.
All right, to go through the meeting rules and procedures, the chair will call each agenda item, and then each applicant will be invited to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the commission in order to facilitate a smooth presentation. Once the presentation is concluded, the chair will ask Landmark staff to summarize Design Review Advisory Committee recommendations and any other public comments received. The deadline for public comment is noon on the Tuesday prior to any regularly scheduled Cleveland Landmarks Commission meeting. Any received comments are distributed to the commission members prior to the meeting. The staff will then identify any members of the public present and scheduled to speak. Public comment is allowed at the discretion of the chair, and any individual providing public comment is permitted 2 minutes to speak to the agenda item in which they have an interest. The chair will then request a recommendation from staff. The commission will then begin deliberations and project review. Any commission member except the chair may make a motion at any point after an agenda item has been called.
All right, we will call the May 8th, 2025 Landmarks Commission meeting to order. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Dreyer?
Here.
Mr. Dulick? Here. Councilmember Gray?
Here.
Mr. Lozier? Director Mersman?
Here.
Mr. Sambury?
Here.
Mr. Strickland?
Here.
Mr. Trosick?
Here.
Dr. Williams?
Here.
And Ms. Trott?
Here.
Madam Chair, we do have quorum. I'd also like to note that we have Jessica Beam, Carl Brunges, and myself from Landmark staff, and we should have Sierra Lipscomb joining us from the Law Department shortly. It looks like Patty McGinty Aston is online.
Excellent. Then we will begin with our report.
Yes, and yeah, Madam Chair, just a little quick background on this one. This is a new historic marker program. Typically, we handle historic markers administratively, and that's what we did on this one. But since this was a new program to the area, we wanted to give them the opportunity to share information about it and tell us about some of the upcoming community engagement events they have. So
Excellent. All right. Who will be presenting on this one?
I will be presenting. My
Excellent.
name is David Wilson,
Go ahead,
and
Mr.
I'm
Wilson.
here with. Okay, thank you. And I am here with Pastor Richard Gibson, who is the leader of Elizabeth Baptist Church, where the marker will be installed. And am I to share my screen to go through the presentation? Oh, okay. Great.
No, it will be shared on our side, and just a little housekeeping. If you'd like it to be on the slides to be progressed, please just let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you. We can go to the next slide. So again, thank you to Landmarks Commission. We presented this at last month's Greater Cuyahoga Valley Historic Design Review Committee, and they recommended us to present this as a special presentation to the Landmarks Committee. As I said, my name is David Wilson. I am co-director along with Samia Bray and in legacy of Jackie Gillen of the Black Environmental Leaders Association. And we, the Black Environmental Leaders Association, is taking on this project and have been assembling a coalition of partners to bring awareness to events that happened in 1911. A man by the name of John Jordan was lynched in Cleveland, in the west side of Cleveland. He and two of his friends were picking cherries from a cherry orchard and were chased 2 miles and ultimately confronted by a mob of about what was reported at the time 300 to 500 people. And John Jordan was gunned down in a lot on the corner of Lorraine and West 109th Street. And so this particular event is something that was documented by the Equal Justice Initiative, which is located in Montgomery, Alabama. They were started about 10 years ago to bring awareness to the to bring awareness to the really the era of racial terror that happened right after Reconstruction between 1870 and the 1950s, and have meticulously documented 4,000 incidents of lynching that have taken place in America between that time. There have been 3 other memorial projects that have been done in the state of Ohio. This will be the 4th. And we are really just we are happy and pleased to be able to bring this to the community, so they are aware not only of what took place in 1911, but of the Community Remembrance Project and what it means to bring awareness to and bring the community to a place of understanding and healing. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the project will be located at Elizabeth Baptist Church, which is in the Hyacinth community in Slavic Village in Ward 5. Next slide. The marker itself will be located on the southwest corner of Elizabeth Baptist Church's building. It will be about 20 feet off the corner and located about 5 feet off of the sidewalk in a very highly visible spot along East 61st Street. Next slide. And so that's where the marker will stand. Next slide. And so this is really ultimately what it's going to look like. It is currently being fabricated by the Equal Justice Initiative right now. We plan on having delivery in the next couple of weeks. But as you could see, and if you can go to the next slide, it is an aluminum panel that is approximately 42 inches wide and 38 inches in height, about 200 pounds, and will stand once it's installed in the ground, stand about 7 to 8 feet tall. And in those, as you can see right there, that is the language that's going to on the back of the marker. Next. I'm sorry, can people hear me right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I think I lost connectivity there for a second. So the marker will be installed, pretty standard installation, hand dug in the ground about 2.5 to 3 feet with concrete, and then the top will be the top of the marker will be installed on top of the post. Next slide. And we are also going to install a planting bed around the marker and fill it with 28 daylilies. This particular daylily is yellow, and we think it will really accentuate the marker, and has a very long bloom time between May and August, to be about tall.
We're having a little difficulty hearing you right now. If you could repeat your sentence about the heights or the of the daylilies.
I'm sorry, are you able to hear me?
We're able to hear you now.
Okay, good. I believe the question was about the height of the daylilies.
You said there will be daylilies that are yellow planted around the marker, and that's where you broke up.
Okay, yes, and it'll be at their mature height. They get about they get to be about 1 foot. Next slide. And that's all. And I'd actually like to invite Pastor Gibson to say a few words just about Elizabeth Baptist Church and the connection of this marker to the surrounding geographic area.
So thanks to the Landmark Commission for your work. We're appreciative of the opportunity to be able to have the marker on our campus. It's important in terms of capturing the history. It's also, I think, a launch point for additional work that'll happen in this community, specifically the Sideway Bridge. So as we think about the eventual restoration of that bridge, this is a link to that. And so again, quickly, thank you for your work, and we look forward to advancing this initiative.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. I believe we also have a Slavic Village representative with us today.
Hi, yes, good morning. This is Crystal Sierra from Slavic Village Development. Just wanting to show our support for the project today. We're really excited that this is coming to the neighborhood and offer an opportunity to reflect and heal. So we're really excited and fully support.
Excellent. Thank you for that feedback. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments.
Yeah, I guess, anyone who has any questions, comments, there's no, motion or vote taken on this, but we did want to invite the applicant to share any information they have about public engagement events and opportunities they have coming up in the next few months. There we go.
Absolutely. So I did want to mention a marker unveiling and dedication event is scheduled to take place on June 22nd as part of Juneteenth weekend at Elizabeth Baptist Church following the 12 p.m. service. And all other events will be listed and posted on the Black Environmental Leaders Association's website. And we'll be following up with that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions and comments from the commission?
Madam Chair, I've had my hand raised for.
Oh, sorry. I was looking around the room. So I believe Dr. Williams had her hand first, and then Mr. Strickland. Oh, Dr. Williams, we're having difficulty hearing you. You're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to say quickly to both Mr. Wilson and to Pastor Gibson that I appreciate the work that they're doing in documenting this tragic era in Ohio's history and also Cleveland's history. And also want to thank you for keeping alive the spirit of the work of Jackie Gillen, who was a good friend of mine and also a good friend of the Western Reserve Historical Society, where Pastor Gibson has also served in a leadership capacity with the African American Archives Auxiliary. Thanks also for linking this chapter in our history with that of the Sideaway Bridge project. And I'm happy to know that you have the support of other members of the Slavic Village community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious to know what the link between this church site in Slavic Village has to the actual, I understand that the lynching took place at West 109th Street. And I was just curious as to what the linkage is between the Slavic Village site versus the site of the lynching.
I will mention before handing it off to Pastor Gibson that the Equal Justice Initiative, they are not necessarily prescriptive about the exact location where the lynching takes place in terms of placing the marker. Their guidance was, it should happen within the community at large. So, certainly locating this in Cleveland was very important, but the connection to Elizabeth Baptist Church, Pastor Gibson being a member of the Black Environmental Leaders Association, but also just the location being adjacent to the Sideaway Bridge, which, in a lot of ways stands as a symbol of a civic of the civil rights era, that kind of having that rich history linked in, we thought was a very important story and narrative to tell as part of this story as well.
All right, I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Other questions and comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just want to say, I want to just learning about the history about the EJ marker is really astounding. So just to say the least that because of the redistricting of this ward, to be connected with Ward 3, which I will be the council per se moving forward, hopefully, just to say the least, just to say the least. But to say how intrigued this history is, and also I want to echo Ms. Williams on Jackie Gillen, which she was part of the Natural Leadership Institute, and I'm the class of 28. It's astounding that they are reference her, with this marker as well. So I just want to say congratulations on this marker.
Councilwoman. Additional questions and comments from the commission? Not seeing any or hearing any online or seeing any online or hearing any in the room. Since this is a report out, there's no motions or anything that we need to take in.
That's correct. No motions. Just, want to thank the applicants for coming in and sharing their project with us today.
Yes, thank you. We're very excited to see this move forward.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Have a great day. We'll then move on to our schematic plan reviews. We'd like to welcome the first applicant for the new construction of the Ohio City Hotel.
Good morning. Thanks for having us today. We're back. We were here last in December. I would say what you're about to see is drastically different than what we proposed to you at that point in time. But it is for the boutique hotel that we're proposing on the corner of West 26th Street and Lorraine Avenue in Ohio City. Currently a surface parking lot owned by Ohio City Incorporated. And so we've been working with them for the better part of a year and a half to put a deal together for a much needed use in this area. Big glaring void for the near west side and really the west side of Cleveland in general. There's not a single hotel really full service between downtown and the airport, and then on 90 on the north side until you get to Crocker Park. So we believe that this use will not just serve the near west side and the near south side of Cleveland, but a lot of the inner ring western suburbs as well. Go to the next slide. I also have Brian Murch on the phone. He's the design principal at DLR. Amy Haney's here with me as well from DLR. And then Ben Trimble from Ohio City Incorporated. This is just about our company. So this is my first project outside of Harbor Bay, which is the last company I worked for last year. We developed the intro project, kind of kitty corner here on the corner of 25th and Lorraine, but my first full venture outside of that company on my own. Next slide. Keep going, please. Just some site context and location here. We went through this, so I'll be quick, but it's the service parking lot at the corner, northwest corner of 26th Street and Lorraine Avenue, adjacent to the Barber College, to Great Lakes Brewing Company's pub, as well as their large brewing facility, along with some smaller 2- and 3-story buildings to the west. And then there's an appendage to the property that actually abuts West 28th Street next to the loading docks at the rear and the St. Ignatius practice field. But what you'll see in our plans is we really think that's a boon to the project and a benefit so that we can activate the 2 main primary street frontages and really use that appendage for parking and accessory access and service uses. I think this is also a good photo to show the scale of the surrounding buildings. So we have kind of the United Bank building there on the right, which is 10 stories. It's about 118 feet to the roof. The Westside Market Clock Tower, which is 137 feet. Intro is off the page, but that's 115. The Friesen Sheely is a 5-story building that tops out, I believe, around 60 feet. And then the rest are just kind of interspersed 2- and 3-story buildings. So what we're going to show you is a 7-story building, which previously was shown as 8. We've removed a floor, and we think it fits really beautifully in between kind of the heights of the surrounding buildings that have been there in the historic district. Next page, please. Just some existing conditions. It's a beautiful surface parking lot at the moment. There are some trees that line the perimeter, but a lot of the sidewalk is cracking, it's spalling, it needs replaced, quite frankly, as a lot of the sidewalks in Ohio City are at the moment. And then the site is surrounded by power lines and utility poles on all sides, and so that McLean Court is sort of a back alley that is still a public right-of-way to access the rear of the buildings that are on Lorraine Avenue. To the right, where the guardrail is in that photo, begins our property, and that's where we'll have some parking and a drive lane to the rear, as well as some fire access. And on the 2 street frontages here on the right side, that will be the corner of our building. Next slide. And again, just kind of taking some different views. The upper left picture is kind of looking from Market Avenue in front of the Barber College towards the pay booth, where sometimes it's manned, sometimes it's empty, but it's a parking station where people can pay for their hourly and monthly parking. So that will be coming down, and along with the utility poles that you see along West 26th and Lorraine, we will be removing those and burying those lines so that we have a much better public realm and pedestrian approach to the building. And then this bottom right photo currently shows the trash enclosure and a storage shed that is on the property that is, I'll say, very loosely kept. There's a lot of trash that gets thrown out there, and it just kind of ends up piling up and becoming an eyesore adjacent to the secondary loading dock there for Great Lakes Brewing. So we'll be removing that, taking that down, and putting trash in an enclosed room off the backside of the building, so that is no longer an issue. Next page. These are kind of hard to read in this condition, so I'll just quickly zoom through this, but they're more for when you're digging through stuff on your own time here. But this just shows the conditions and what we're going to be demolishing, and we'd also be obviously asking for approval to demolish the couple small structures on site, which include that pay booth and 2 trash enclosures. Other than that, there are no real buildings on the site. Shows the asphalt that we'll be ripping up to replace and put utilities underground. So we can kind of just zip through these next couple since they're a little too technical. Yep, keep going. Okay, and here I will pass to Brian Murch so he can start to discuss the program and the overall approach to what we're doing with the design and the architecture with the project. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We're good? Okay. All right. So I think just the executive summary, just to cover some of the programmatic pieces that go into the hotel. So right now we're sitting just below about 100,000 square feet. So 98.9 is the current gross square footage for the building. We've got 3 F&B venues, including our rooftop, a ground level restaurant that will anchor the corner of Lorraine and 26th Street, as well as a coffee shop that we're planning for the hotel lobby. So those 3 conditions give us those 3 different food and beverage venues. About 129 total guest rooms. So that's the keys that we have in the hotel design currently. A little bit of wellness with just our fitness center and that focus that comes with a lot of boutique-style hotels. We do have an event space that's on the 2nd floor that we'll see in a plan here in a little bit, but just thinking about events, meeting space, anything else we can host as part of the programming for the hotel. So about 4,500 square foot associated with that. And then on-site parking, about 9 stalls in total, which basically line the back edge of our service drive. So it gives us a little bit of access for staff and the like, just connected to the site on the backside. Next slide, I think, dives into a little bit of massing for the building. So just looking at the composition, the ground level, just thinking about that podium, how we address scale, so you can see how it steps back to the tower. Number 4, alluding to that ballroom space I just spoke to. So the larger volume sitting just above the street level. Number 5 is our guest tower. So 3 full floor plates of guest rooms. Levels, or at least number 6 is the rooftop venue and some of the support space that goes with that. So just thinking about how we line the top edge of the building. Next slide. Here's one of our site plans. This one a little more zoomed out. I think the takeaways here are just thinking about our setbacks. So you see those red demarcations to really just highlight some of the areas around the building. I think probably the most significant one is the 12-foot off the back side of the building. So just providing access from an egress standpoint, a service standpoint, but also just being mindful of the foundations of the building behind us. So as we look to put our utilities and foundations into the site work, or at least for the building, we just wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of tolerance between that existing structure and where we're going to start our construction. The other one would be the front edge. You see 9'3", so that's our property line, the red line, and then giving ourselves a little bit of breathing room at the front door. You'll see in some of the images that will follow, but just thinking about how we create outdoor activation, an extension of that lobby space, just spilling out onto the sidewalk, cafe seating, just giving ourselves a little more breathing room at the front door to allow for our guest traffic in and out of the building. Next slide. Here's a little more zoomed in version of that, so you can see those street activations that I spoke to. Probably more likely a entrance to the restaurant, like I mentioned, at Lorraine and 26th at the corner. You see also the site access that happens directly at the end of Market Avenue. So just thinking about how that visual terminus comes into play, I would say, in our main entrance for the hotel. And then lastly, the service on the backside. I think those are two of the biggest intersections that will happen with the hotel from a guest standpoint and service standpoint.
Just add a little color before we go to the next slide here. Just some of the utility constraints and things that we've got that are dictating some of our design decisions. Off to the right, those two sort of square boxes, those are electrical transformers that will replace all of the utility poles that are holding the power lines on 26th Street. And so we have to have them on site, and they can't be within the building footprint because the electrical company will need consistent access to them. But what we are doing is basically shrouding them from view as best as we can with some street trees and some tall grasses and things that will really keep them out of view. Next to this this patio space that we have as well, just off the right of the lobby. What we're proposing with some of our landscaping is that trees are actually sunken into the sidewalk and just have tree grates as opposed to raised beds with curbs. I've just learned that people will walk right through them. We did them all around the perimeter of Intro, and they get trampled consistently. It's just the path of least resistance is through the beds, not around them. And so it also, just because of the pedestrian nature of this area, I've said this before, but one of my pet peeves, and I live in the area, is someone's walking the dog, someone's pushing a stroller, you're going in opposite directions, and one of you has to pull over to get out of the way because some of the sidewalks are just pinched. And so putting those trees at grade allows that to kind of become pedestrian realm. And so we're also pushing and working with CPP to keep the light posts in this area, the Acorn style, more residential lamp, as opposed to some of the taller, what I'll call more surgical lighting that they have. We think that matches what's going on Market Avenue, and so we're really pushing to work with them to make that amenable. And then you'll see in the renderings as we pull those up, we did do some photorealistic renderings at this point to really push forward what we're trying to propose. But the entrance lines up directly with the vista down Market Avenue. We think that's really important, not just for really providing new activity and programming on Market Avenue itself, which hasn't really happened since it was closed to vehicular traffic. So we're leaning into that. We're working with OCI. We're working with some of the other neighborhood stakeholders to figure out a more programmatic plan for that. But also with the $70 million going into the West Side Market and the first work that's happening around the arcade and that continued pathway across West 25th Street, this really does become a feature view down the corridor. So we're just kind of taking note of what's going on around us and trying to feather in nicely to that. If you go to the next slide.
Yeah, so this really just highlights how we're thinking about those pathways that Dan mentioned. I think our intent is to upgrade that surface, so it's not just brushed concrete. How we enhance things in terms of the pavers in and around the building. We want to create that welcome mat at our front door, a little bit of a welcome mat at the corner where the entrance to the restaurant exists, and then that curb cut that's going to really allow us for our cars to be able to pull off 26th Street and unload and load as people come and go from the hotel lobby. Next slide. These next few slides really just highlight some of our landscape design. So looking at the different species of trees and grasses and plantings in and around the building. Next slide. Some details. Next slide. Some of the site accessories, I would say, in terms of bike racks, thinking about our planters being a mobile version versus something a little more fixed. I know, coming with a hotel, we want it to soften up so it's not just the ground plane, but also thinking about some of these planter boxes that help line the cafe seating, that the railing that defines that space, as well as just some screening and the tree grates and everything that's going to make up part of the site. Next slide. So these next few slides will go through the floor plans, just kind of touch on a few of the programmatic areas in the building. Essentially, this is our lobby level, so everything that's associated with that street. You can see those colored areas that really talk about activation. So everything from the restaurant to the hotel lobby to the kitchen, Just really trying to activate all the facades along both Lorraine and 26th Street. Next slide. If we go up one level, I mentioned that ballroom space that lives on this floor. So you see that orange box anchoring the corner. That's the 4,500 square foot venue that we've created. The yellow shows off some of the pre-function that is associated with the space. And then more importantly, I think the way that the building steps back, you're left with this terrace as it wraps that corner. So addressing that pedestrian scale down at the ground plane, but also just thinking about how we create that activation up high. So as people spill out of that event, they can look down on the street below and really just creating a visual connectivity from first level up to second. The rest of the colored boxes, which you'll start to see in the plans here, are the guest room types. So the suites really flexing some area at the corners of the building where we can add more windows and really enhance a few of those guest rooms. And then the light blue and dark blue just being a mix of double queens and kings. The next slide. So this would be associated with the volume of the ballroom. As you can imagine, trying to get that ceiling up a little bit higher. So the pre-function, the ballroom, and then there's this volume of space that's right at the end of Market Avenue that really highlights the entrance to the building. So as you walk in that front door, just creating this dramatic moment that you would be able to look up and see the pre-function. So those three big volumes offset some of those guest rooms, and you can see how we backfill, again, suites and kings and double queens throughout that double loaded corridor. The next slide shows more of a typical condition as you climb up through the tower. The next slide shows yet another guest room floor. I think the next slide, yeah, so here's just one of the unique floors. So this is the top level of the guest rooms, and you see that purple space come to life. And that would be a large suite for our presidential suite at the very top of the building. And then as an added amenity, thinking about an outdoor terrace as part of that. The next slide. This is our rooftop. So the venue that we are creating in terms of a bar and a lounge with an outdoor area that wraps that corner, looks back towards downtown and the skyline. And then down the hall, you've got all those gray boxes being our support. So restroom blocks, a little bit of a warming kitchen that lives up here for a small menu. There's also another private venue for cocktails, which you see on the plan left there. Just thinking about how we can host two different parties at one time. So just gives us some flexibility in how we can sell the space at different times of the year. The next slide. Dan, you want to jump in and maybe talk a little bit about the materiality?
Sure. So this is the inspiration that we used to kind of define what we sort of redid since December. We went backwards. We looked at some of the other, I'll call, inspirational neighborhoods that are anchored by public markets. Chelsea in New York and Fulton Market in Chicago. And one of the things that I think is a challenge as a developer when we're building new construction is making stuff not feel so commercial and really making it feel for this location, part of the neighborhood, consistent with the scale and the charm and the character of the Market District. And so we really leaned in heavy to the use of masonry as opposed to other materials. So what you'll see to follow is an entire masonry building as opposed to anything previously that might have had metal panel on it or some other things that I think are just, quite frankly, less charming. So I challenge the architectural team also to really lean into kind of a consistent grid. I think there's a calming effect to that, and it also allowed us to do something really interesting and exciting at the ground level, which you see there in the bottom right. This is just a little storefront in London, of all places, and they use this really amazing glossy glazed green brick. And so we thought that kind of a little tip of the cap to some of the glazed terracotta inside the West Side Market and some of the Petita materials that you see on that would be fun to sort of incorporate our own twist on and really make a statement so that our building over the course of time stands out, is visually interesting, and is something that people want to talk about. So we put some of that flavor into the first floor while keeping it, I think, timeless and contrasting with the 6 stories above. And so these are the images that really inspired what you're about to see.
Yeah, and I think that as we looked at not only the scale that Dan had mentioned, but also just that handcrafted nature, I think ultimately hotels have to have this sensibility of a residential building. So it's the materiality, it's the warmth of the materials that gives it that flavor and characteristic that I think we were trying to achieve. Something else you'll notice in these renderings is just the depth of the architecture. We didn't want it to feel flat. So really playing some games with, compressing a few of the faces of the facade to really play with those shadow lines. So throughout the day, as the hotel goes from day to night and really starts to light up in the evening when the hotel becomes more active, I think that was the notion we were trying to achieve. So this view, as you can tell, is that visual terminus at the end of Market Avenue. You see that 2-story volume, some light fixtures dangling in that space as we invite people up to that meeting level, that glowing lantern at the end of the street that really just gives us a great opportunity to highlight that front entrance and what we know as the pay booth currently in the parking lot now becomes this. So pretty dramatic change. I think something else worth mentioning is Dan mentioned brick as our primary material. And so as we looked at some of those guardrail conditions, we've got this rooftop venue, we've got that terrace just outside the ballroom. It was the notion of using brick as that same composition, but then using it in a perforated manner. So it allows airflow through, maybe some opportunities for the landscaping to kind of take over the building. So you see those areas where vines are crawling through those gaps in between the masonry and really just softening up the architecture and giving it a little more of a residential look and feel, like I mentioned. Color-wise, the other thing I think is just how we define the base of the building. So that whole pedestrian realm, thinking about scale, that reflectivity, making the building have its own personality in the composition of, West Side Market. So thinking about how that green really just gives us an iconic moment as people pass by and really define the Ohio City Hotel as the anchor for this intersection.
The other thing that we wanted to do was really create some contrast, and we actually have the materials, the proposed samples here, if anyone would like to take a look. But essentially, it's a sort of a hunter green glazed brick. A sandcastle is the color of the what I'll call the tower. So it's probably a little bit warmer and a little bit more beige than the rendering shows, not quite as white. That's why we brought this with us. Some granite around the base of the building itself, kind of at the sidewalk level, and then anodized dark bronze window mullions, no pure black. We think that just the kind of the warmth of some of the materials and the reason that we chose green was really to kind of pull in some more of that warmth and that color that you kind of see playing off the trees. And at the ground level, once we have a couple other views here, we'll show you we're proposing using some sort of really just kind of traditional canvas awnings that mimic sort of what you see poking out there on the left at the Barber College, as well as what Great Lakes has. Again, just really leaning into that charm and the fact this is a neighborhood and not a downtown central business district. We really wanted to kind of do a contemporary building, but do it in a way that resonates and is contextual to being in a historic district. So next slide.
Yeah, so here's that main entrance we saw in the last view. So thinking about that canopy and how it reaches out to really give us cover at the front door, being iconic. I think as hotels really start to tell a story, it's not just a storefront glazing system, but to Dan's point, it's that anodized bronze that really gives it a little bit of a patina and the look that matches the rest of the aesthetic of the building. The other thing you can see is that patio in the distance. So looking back towards Lorraine, some awnings that would give us a little bit of shade from the sun at different times of the day, but also just highlighting that sense of scale along the street front.
Go to the next slide.
And then this view, just the overall, looking back towards the intersection there at Lorraine and 26th. You can see that dark base just highlighting all those street frontages, the meeting space terraced up above as the building cascades or steps up in its volume. There's that node that sticks out along Market Avenue that really defines the entrance, and then the canopy.
The other couple of things are signage. We want to be intelligent but subtle about our signage, and so this is only schematic, and we're thinking about ways to study and where to put it. There is a kind of a vertical blade sign that is shown on the south end there on the upper 3 floors that would project off and kind of just be a Ohio City Hotel, which is the formal name of the project. So there's that piece, and then on the canopy at the front door, there'd be some sort of either interior illuminated channel letters or something integrated into that canopy to just call out, the building. But we don't want to plaster it full of signage. We don't want to have too much crazy stuff. I think what we're seeing, what we're proposing is a timeless, like, really, to me, it's a calm aesthetic, and we want to let the architecture stand out and speak for itself. So with that, I think, and is that our final slide?
Included
the materiality. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so like Dan had mentioned, I think just the composition of the core materials, that glazed brick that lines the base, a little bit of that granite that protects us during the winter months, and salt and shovels and everything that's going to interact at the bottom of the building, giving us a little bit of a shoe, if you will, as the building meets the sidewalk. The dark bronze metal, the buff brick color for the tower, and then some of those warm tones that we're trying to institute with the soffits, and how we can bring a metal that or a wood soffit for those particular areas, just to highlight them and give them a little bit of warmth in contrast to some of the other brick.
I guess the last thing I'll speak to is just the overarching need for the project. We'll be using the TDM scorecard to help reduce the parking requirements for the project. In the meantime, we are working with adjacent owners to have complementary uses of their lots in the evening, which is the main time that we'll have to utilize space. We are partnered with Marriott on this project, so it will be a Marriott Tribute Portfolio Hotel, which I don't think has been out in the public yet, but that is official. And so we're also just leaning into that partnership and their national data of just, how many people are truly coming to the hotel via vehicle, and what does it tell us, and how many people are using alternative methods like, ride share, drop-offs, things like that. And so we don't see parking as an issue. I know in Ohio City it's always a lightning rod, but we have had, I think, probably close to 20 meetings on the topic with various neighbors and stakeholders, and this will be a long-term ownership project for us, so we won't be just building it and then on our way. We'll be stakeholders as well. Have been a stakeholder for a long time, both as a resident and as a business owner, and on the Ohio City Special Improvement District as the treasurer. So there's a lot of tentacles that have me involved with the neighbors beyond just proposing a project and kind of moving on. So, Brian, I'll zip through these so that we can kind of just wrap up here. But, those are some interior photos that are driving what we think we're doing on the inside. And these are just, some more high-level elevations to the building that show the rhythm of the glass, the intent to do single pane windows, and just some of the ways that we're thinking about dealing with, the facade. So obviously at SD level, there's still some work to be done, and there's still some decisions that need to be made relative to the building structure that will define whether there's 3 bays or 4 bays of windows on a specific end of the building. But we think overall we have a concept we're excited about. Personally, I'm in love with the design. I hope you guys are too, and we're excited to hear your feedback. So thank you for the time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned the Ohio City or local?
Yeah, I guess if
Mr.
Ben,
Trimble?
did you have anything?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Trimble, Chief Real Estate Officer for Ohio State Incorporated. I believe we submitted a letter of support the last hearing. Obviously, we're fully in support of this project. We are the owner of the property. We went through about a year-long RFI and RFP process for this project and chose Mr. Whalen because of the high-quality project that he delivered across the street. I'd like to thank him and the team at DLR, I think, for exceeding our expectations on the design of this project, which was a major concern of ours. We think the hotel use is an extremely needed one. And in fact, we've identified it as early as 2015 in our strategic plans and just haven't been successful in delivering one for the neighborhood yet. We think it's vital to both the ongoing growth of our district as well as to really meet the demand that we're seeing right now in our neighborhood that's currently being filled mostly by illegal Airbnbs in our residential neighborhood. So we think it's fantastic. It's a slam dunk. We thank you all for your consideration here today.
All right, thank you. We'll then move on to the Design Review Advisory Committee recommendations.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This project did go before the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee, conceptual schematically on May 1st, 2025. I guess with all the recusals, with OCI being involved, there was only one committee member who was present and able to share opinions, but general feedback from him was, very pleased with the direction, found the new design and presentation very easy to understand. He wanted to see, or suggested they stay with the neutral tones on the upper floors of masonry. Felt there was a full correction in the pedestrian and building wall experience from the previous proposal. And I think staff would echo a lot of that. We had a lot of internal discussions about scale and everything, but I think this proposal, even in its schematic form, I think fits into the district much better and stays within the Secretary of the Interior standards. So we would say it's appropriate, headed in the right direction. So I think our only comment is, when this comes back for final, we'd like to see additional renderings like further down Lorraine and kind of all the elevations so we can really, because this is one you're going to see from a lot of far off spaces. So we kind of want to make sure everyone has a full understanding of that. That is all we have.
Thank you. We'll move on to landmark staff recommendations.
Oh, sorry, that was kind of all boiled into one.
Okay, there you go. Excellent efficiency. All right, then we will open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I recall from the original presentation that there was a parking level that was part of the program. And I would just like to hear from the applicant what if I'm correct in remembering that accurately, and what the calculus was in terms of just having 9 stalls versus the parking that was originally proposed, and what the thoughts are about how uses of the hotel will be supported.
Sure.
With the limited parking.
Yeah, thank you. You are correct. There previously was a level of parking on the second floor, so it was part of the podium level. Couple things, right? So we took feedback that maybe the scale was just slightly too large. We also were at that point into high-rise code, being above 75 feet to our tallest occupiable floor. So it gave us an entirely different set of rules from how we had to engineer and build the building. We also have, and I'm getting a little technical, but these are the real answers. So that pushed us into a different code level. We have pretty bad fill on the site from old caved-in buildings that were here, as in a lot of urban infill sites where they just tore them down and left them. And so we have to remove a lot of that. It also is adding a lot of complexity to the manner in which we do our foundations for the building. So a shorter building, a lighter building without a level of parking just inevitably leads us to a simpler and more cost-effective foundation strategy. So those are kind of the more technical and economic reasons. From an aesthetic I think the scale at 7 stories with like a really strong 1-level base, and this is me as a developer, not the architect, but it feels really, really great to me. If the building were 1 floor taller or had a 2-level base, it just, the proportions maybe would have been a little different. And as for the parking uses and demand itself, I think parking is always the thing that in a lot of ways economically destroys the ability to get a deal done. And so what we want to do is propose a building we know we can build. And we've been working extremely hard with St. Ignatius, with MRN, who owns the adjacent United Bank building and the 240 odd spaces behind it on various surface lots, as well as with the West Side Market and Rosemary, the executive director there, to really work on a comprehensive strategy all days and all times of the week to figure out, what is the true demand of the neighborhood itself, but also what demand we're truly driving. And, hotel traffic comes in the evening and it stays overnight. And most of the time you're zipping out of there certainly before your checkout, but to go do whatever you're in Cleveland to do. And so the parking demand is at the exact opposite hours of when Ohio City typically has its peak parking, troubles, I'll say, which is daytime when the Ignatius students are parking on all the side streets, and the market days, specific on the weekends between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. I've observed this like a maniac over the last 7 years since building Intro across the street. And the parking problem is primarily a perception thing, and it is a finite period of time where 80% of the time lots are 20% full, and 20% of the time they're 80% full. And so I think, it's an easy thing to tout and say, but it's the truth. And really filling in these empty lots with development and further connecting the walkable urban district and the commercial corridor on 26th with, St. Ignatius, and with some of the business growth that's been happening along Lorraine. Lorraine may be one of the biggest small business kind of areas right now for where you're seeing new things pop up almost weekly. And we want to be an asset that helps fill that in. And so that's kind of the well-rounded, I guess I'll say, response to the overall situation and what drove the massing change and the reduction in the parking.
All right, thank you very much. It's in our experience, well, I've been on the commission for quite some time. So in my experience, lack of parking in development projects is always a note of concern for neighbors in the surrounding area around a proposed project. So I'm very satisfied with your answer, and I think that'll be helpful as an explanation to any objections that might be raised by neighborhoods and their concern about a lack of parking as part of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Strickland. Other questions and comments from the commission? Yes, Director. Thank you for the presentation and the project. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of your design choices, and also specifically around the public realm, thinking about what that sidewalk experience is and how to tie into the neighborhood amenities around there. Having the front entrance right into the West Side Market, I think, is really nice. And I concur as a neighbor with a lot of out-of-town family that it's really hard sometimes to find a place where people can be nearby, where we can walk and connect without like having to host people in our homes and trying to find Airbnbs. And so I really appreciate the amenity that you're adding here. I think that often we collectively let concern around cars and what to do with vehicles sort of drive the shape that projects take. And there are a lot of downsides that come to that in terms of the space that's created. I wasn't here on the commission when the first round came through, but I can imagine that the building would also look and feel a lot different with a bunch of cars parked on the second level as it does with many totally activated building frontage, which is consistent with the other historic buildings in the area. And so I would commend you for being creative about the transportation demand, thinking about how to share parking assets in the neighborhood, and as a result, delivering a building that really contributes to the community on all floors and is active for people. I love to see that. I
look forward to working and on a staff level too, working more on the transportation demand management plan with you. I think in addition to shared parking, this is an incredibly transit rich area. You have the rapid station that connects right to the airport and into downtown. You have really high frequency and great transit on both Lorraine and West 25th Street. And RTA is investing, as I'm sure you know, on those corridors and on new rail cars. And I think when you think about out of town folks coming in from the airport or from other sort of connections, even Amtrak or other things that we're working to expand, this is a great location to arrive at, not need a car, well, to get there and then to explore the city. So would encourage you and look forward to seeing the transit components of your transportation demand management program, as well as potentially what shared bikes, what access to scooters and bikes could look like here for folks that want to explore the neighborhood or be close in proximity to all the great things that this part of the city has to offer. And I guess my final reflection is that I live relatively close to here, just a neighborhood over, and I know we as residents want the type of neighborhood amenities that more people help sustain. And I appreciate how a hotel brings people in to invest in Cleveland and to help support those restaurants, markets, even things like grocery stores that we all want to see in our neighborhood and to support. And that can be challenging sometimes with the number of residents that we have in areas. So thanks for the project. I look forward to seeing it come to fruition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Other questions and comments from the commission? I guess I'll just echo some of the comments. And, I do think this is a need in this area, similar, having family out of the area. It's very hard to find something to meet everyone's demands. I do appreciate the infill of these parking lots also, in the respect that it's missing teeth in the center of the historic district. So I do really like this filling that need on both sides. I do think parking is something that shouldn't drive the project, but should also should be a continued focus of the district, though, just being in the Over the Rhine in Cincinnati 2 days ago, and the 3CDC approach of consolidated parking to meet that district, to relieve that onus on the project so the projects can create that density, but address parking opportunities for people to come to the district and partake in all its needs. So I look forward to also seeing that, to see how the district continues to address it for all of the new businesses in the area. But overall, I really do appreciate the use and it's how it addresses the urban fabric. My only question or comment would be the signage. Knowing most of the traffic that will come to this is from people out of town. They're going to come from 90 or basically on Lorraine. They're all going to come on Lorraine. I would agree that seeing some of this from a pedestrian or vehicular, because that's how they're going to arrive, right? Like it or not. And that experience and what they're going to experience and how that signage may or may not be appropriate. It might be better if it was closer to the pedestrian realm so that you can actually, orient yourself. And how that's going to interact with the restaurant itself too, because you don't want them to compete. But overall, I think it's a nice, it's a very nice composition also. And just my only very nitpicky is the completion of the mass. It feels slightly incomplete to me personally at the top of the building. It feels like it wants to be anchored just slightly more, but that's, I guess, very nitpicky sort of elements that in my personal approach to the design. But overall, I'm in support of the project.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on that. Would you have a suggestion of how to kind of push that anchor through that you're describing?
It feels like it needs a more substantial, element at the top for me personally. Which could be through corbelling, to stay within your masonry. It could be with a material change, which it looks like you have. It just feels a little, the proportions are not aligned with everything else I see in your composition. But that's, my personal approach.
I just have one question with regards to process. So assuming and hoping that we do eventually come back and get full approval, we would like to apply for this in two different building permits, one for demolition and site work. And so I'm wondering, do we need a formal full approval to demolish the minor structures that are on site in advance? And is that something that we can achieve today, if so that we can proceed forward with at least demo and site work in a fashion that is ahead of the full building permit itself?
We don't have a like case number or anything for that, and that wasn't on the agenda. That was put out publicly, so we can't really add that today. I mean, I guess as far as the demolition of the small parking structure and the dumpster enclosures, they're not significant. You can kind of consider them temporary structures. So, I mean, if you're talking about removing those, it's probably one thing. If you're going to like clear the whole site and start on, foundation level work, that would be something that you'd need to come and present and get an approval from the commission. But I would think, I guess by the time you're ready to kind of come for your final design, I think, if demolition is going to be included in that, we could just have that as a separate agenda item. And then even if you end up tabled for the final building approvals or get an approval, you'll have the approval for the demolition at that point.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Other questions and comments from the commission?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Echo Director Mershman. Oh, sorry. I would echo Director Mershman's and Chairwoman Trott's commentaries. I was here, were many of you in the last schematic presentation. And I think as a member of this body, I can say that many times that was a very robust discussion. And I think what this body likes to do is, put a lot of stuff out there for you to consider. And it doesn't always come reflected when we see the first schematic presentation, let alone a second conceptual presentation, shall we say. So I just want to thank the team, and thank everybody that's involved, because it's gratifying to see that you're really engaging in the process, not only with us, but with your neighborhood and with the bigger challenges faced by not only Ohio City, but the city of Cleveland, really thinking deeply about what are the big needs and how can we creatively address parking without letting it blow our budget or drive the neighborhood into something that it doesn't want to be. So just a big thank you, and really enjoy the project. I would also agree with Julie's comments about the top of the building wants to have some love. I wouldn't be averse to even seeing that green brick, which is lovely, find accents or places or even a line somewhere. Again, just personal suggestion, wouldn't have to take it, but just thinking about, because I really do love the base, but I think there's an opportunity to pull some interaction between, and again, going back to, I think your earlier conceptual presentation, the two-story base with the parking void on the second, to turn that not only into a one-story base, but to get active uses and people out on balconies where you can actually see and wave and stuff like that is a delightful thing. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I just want to echo quickly many of the comments that have already been made. I think this is a wonderful project. I think it's a beautiful building. As a non-architect, I have a question, however, about the materiality. And I love the color palette, but I believe I read something in the description of the project about brick veneer in both the buff areas and also the green. Is that in fact the case? Because I'm just thinking about those images of the beautiful brick buildings that you said inspired the look that you're going for here.
No, I think that probably is just terminology. The intent is full depth brick. So I think veneer is just the descriptor in terms of making it clear that it's a cladding, but the intent is that it will be a full depth brick at both the base and the tower.
Okay, thank you.
Anderson. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I appreciate where this is going. I think this is an improvement over the other schematic that we saw. There are some things I really like about this building. I love the green glazed brick. I am very excited to see some color introduced. I'm glad that it's a masonry building. I'm very pleased to see that. As someone who's embraces color, obviously. I would love to see the brick playing off of that green tile with like a warmer brick, like a reddish orange brick. I think that would be a very exciting and historically consistent scheme that I think would visually enhance the project. Although there is terracotta in this area, so I can understand the reference there. I'm in agreement with Mr. Dewick, and Ms. Trott. Something at the top, some resolution there, some maybe reintroducing the green tile would be good. I'm still a little concerned about the massing. I think as we get away from 25th Street, you got the 5-story Friesen and Chile. I think going up from there is not good. That said, I'm pleased that it's a less massing than the previous conceptual design. I'm concerned about the parking. I realize as a traveler, when I go to another city, I usually try not to rent a car unless I have to. So, you're not going to get anywhere near 1-to-1, but I think 9 seems inadequate. I also would not want to see, we're already eliminating a lot. I would not want to see like more street parking eliminated. I think there's parking on the east side of West 26th, and I'm sure that's utilized by people going to the Barber College or getting a smoothie or and I think that should as much street parking as possible be maintained. I think that's pretty much it. So thank you.
Since this is a schematic review, do you feel like you've received enough feedback to continue the development of your design?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, excellent. Then we look forward to seeing you back here in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, everyone.
We will then move on to our next applicant, located at 11150 East Boulevard, Fine Arts Garden Rehabilitation.
My name is Jeffrey Stream.
Feel free to come up to the table. Yes, and if you don't mind turning on the microphone, we'd appreciate it so the people online can hear you also. But it's more formality. You can just speak to us.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Jeffrey Streen. I'm a design consultant to the Cleveland Museum of Art. And we are here today with Matt Langen, with Stimson, with a schematic design, a further development of our landscape master plan, and looking for your feedback this morning. So this is Matt Langen with Stimson.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Jeffrey, for the intro. I'll start just by noting that we had developed a Cleveland Museum of Art Fine Arts Garden Rehabilitation Plan back in 2018. If you can go forward, we'll take a quick look at that on the next slide. This really was a comprehensive look at all of the grounds that the Cleveland Museum of Art manages, including land owned by the museum, land leased from the city of Cleveland to the museum, and then partnerships with adjacent institutions in co-managing some properties. And at this time in 2015, 2016, I was engaged in working with the Museum of Art and Case Western on the Nord Family Greenway, which is the vertical bar of landscape that you can see extending from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen there. And we wanted to build on the momentum of that project that really made University Circle much more accessible from the west for pedestrians and bicyclists. But in doing that, we also wanted to make sure that proposed improvements or momentum building on the Nord Family Greenway project was done in a way that was in the context of the public realm as a whole, and in this case, the majority of the southern half of Wade Park. And so this landscape master plan, if you go to the next slide, really addressed a handful of observations that the museum had. Actually, before I get to those observations, we also wanted to make sure, as part of our planning process, that we pointed out to not only to the museum, but to all of you, the great decisions that the Museum of Art has made over the last 100 years in very careful expansion and development of their property. And this is critically important because if we look at all the peer institutions of the Cleveland Museum of Art across the country, a lot of them have really screwed up that relationship between the museum experience and the landscape experience. And, that's not, the best example of that I could say is the Met in New York, which has completely turned its back on Central Park and is only accessible from the main street along the east side of Central Park. It's also true at the Brooklyn Museum that used to have a great connection to the Botanical Garden and is now you have to walk through acres of parking to go from one institution to the other. Similarly, at the St. Louis Museum of Art, there is a great visual connection between the Turning Basin and the museum. Physically and from an accessibility standpoint, the two things are not connected. And then on the bottom of the screen here in our city in Boston, similarly, the connection between the Back Bay Fens and the Museum of Fine Arts has been diluted by expansion projects by that institution over the course of the last 50 years as well. And then, as you probably know, the Nelson Atkins Museum just made some big decisions about the future of its relationship between the museum and the landscape. And personally, I think they made a good choice, but it's going to change that environment quite a bit from what exists out there today. And so when you compare all of that to the decisions the Museum of Art has made, you can see that it really has preserved that really strong connection both between the museum itself and the Fine Arts Garden to the south and the museum through the Breuer addition to Wade Oval to the north. And I think that's really to be commended. And we want to make sure that we can now, at this point, start to elevate the quality of that landscape experience to be commensurate with the quality of the experience in the building itself. So on the next slide, you'll see some of the observations that we've been making over the past couple of years since we identified the comprehensive master plan back in 2018. We highlighted a whole lot of observations that we'd like to correct, shifting from planning now into implementation. Paving and accessibility, of course, is one of the big impetuses for the project. There's a lot of tripping hazards. There's accessibility concerns with stairs in the historic parts of the landscape. And the overall quality has been eroded. The same is true for all of the garden plantings. A lot of the garden plantings are overgrown. There's some tree hazards that exist out there in the landscape right now, and a lot of the color and texture that was part of the original Olmsted Brothers Fine Arts Garden design in 1928 has been erased from the gardens over the past 100 years, and we want to start to bring some of that color and texture back into the garden experience. Also, there is a program of art and sculpture that exists out in the gardens right now. Most of that art and sculpture was part of the original Fine Arts Garden design, including the fountain in the center of the Zodiac Garden, the Zodiac sculptures, and a series of other sculptures throughout the Fine Arts Garden. All of the art and sculpture in the Fine Arts Garden will be rehabilitated or conserved in some fashion as part of this project. While the design team won't be directly part of that process, it will be facilitated by the Museum of Art and their conservation staff as part of the project. And then lastly, and I think importantly, even though you won't see much of this, the utility infrastructure supporting the 100-year-old garden is failing in many ways. And this project aims to renew and replace the majority of the utility infrastructure throughout the gardens, including electrical, site lighting, storm drainage, and other elements of the infrastructure that exist out there today. Next slide, please.
There's a slight delay. Give us one moment.
Sure, no problem.
Mhm.
We are recalibrating and reconnecting. One moment. There we go. Do you see the screen?
Yes, looks good for my end.
Great.
Okay,
Feel
so
free to continue.
thank you. So this is our schematic design plan for the Fine Arts Garden. You can see the difference between this schematic design effort and the 2018 landscape master plan is this really focuses on the historic Fine Arts Garden footprint, which extends from the 1916 building of the museum on the right-hand side of the image all the way down to Holden Terrace along Euclid Avenue. And if you were to squint at this and compare it against the original design and against the 2018 master plan, all the elements are essentially the same. The major adjustments that we've been making to the Fine Arts Garden design are improved accessibility from all angles, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the upcoming slides. And then mostly and most visually on this diagram, you can see that we're starting to bring some of the color and texture back into the landscape throughout the Fine Arts Garden. I'll also note here that the historic kind of focal axis of the Fine Arts Garden that extends from Holden Terrace across Wade Lagoon, up the mall, through the Zodiac Garden, into the 1916 building. All of that landscape is really much more a restoration project than a reinvention project. We're going to disassemble the entire thing and put it all back together. But once you get outside of that historic axis, where you see these elements that we call the West Oval, the East Oval, the West Terrace, and then the dining terrace further on the top right of your screen, those are new program elements to bring some more contemporary use into the historic gardens in a way that doesn't dilute or detract from the that strong axis that was created with the original garden design. Next slide, please. So to make this palatable for the museum and to align it with a fundraising campaign, we decided to break our schematic design up into a series of phases, scopes A through D. And those phases of work include, for scope A, mostly the museum terraces, the facade rehabilitation of the 1916 building marble facade, and then some of those new terraces, the West Terrace and the dining terrace on the upper side of the museum in this diagram. Scope B includes a restoration of the Zodiac Garden and Mall, and then the incorporation of the two ovals that flank the mall with accessible pathways that connect from the Zodiac Garden down to the lagoon. And then scopes C and D really focus on two things. One, a complete reconstruction of the lagoon feature itself, which is in desperate need of rehabilitation, as you probably know. We would drain the lake and reconstruct all of the masonry edges and the gravel beaches of the lagoon as part of a rehabilitation in scope D. And then around the edges of scope D, including the area of scope C, would be those accessibility connections that I mentioned from the adjacent roadways and boulevards down into the lagoon. Right now, we are actively working on a design development phase for only areas of scope A and B. And so we've determined that to align our efforts with the progress of fundraising, that we're going to push scope areas A and B forward into a scope of work that will be ready for bidding. We're hoping by the end of this calendar year, and we'd love to bring that back to you as soon as we're ready to do so. And then scopes C and D would be deferred into a future phase of work pending the status of the fundraising efforts. Next slide, please. So from a paving and accessibility standpoint, all you're looking at here is on the left-hand side is an inventory of the materials that make up the public realm circulation. And on the right-hand side is our proposed improvements to that, where we're adding accessibility from the surrounding drives down into the lagoon, but we're not really changing the character or the materiality of the Fine Arts Garden itself. We're just adding more opportunity for accessible connections through those spaces. Another important thing to note here is that for pedestrians coming to use the Fine Arts Garden, when you're crossing the major streets and trying to gain access to the lagoon in particular, you're presented in almost all cases with staircases. And while we're not proposing to eliminate any of those historic staircases, we are proposing sloping walks that circumnavigate those stairs so that you can enter the garden at the same place that you're used to entering it, but you are not forced to take the stairs from any perspective, aside from, I should note, the Holden Terrace, which we are not proposing to change in any way, and actually has recently been rehabilitated in the past 5 years. Next slide, please. We also took a very comprehensive look at the quality and condition of the existing landscape and paid particular attention to the ground plane, because the ground plane, even though the tree canopy and, as you know, the beautiful cherry tree display that we've just all been able to witness, those are parts of the Fine Arts Garden that, while they have changed pretty significantly over the last 100 years, the perception remains the same and the character of that remains the same. Whereas at the ground plane level, a lot of the color and texture of the original design for the Fine Arts Garden has been eliminated almost to a complete lawn and tree character now, almost like a typical institutional landscape. And so on the left-hand side, you can see about, I can't remember exactly the number, but somewhere between 70 and 80% of that ground plane, which used to be shrubs and ground covers, is now lawn. And we want to bring that back, but we want to bring it back in a way that's not creating a major maintenance burden for the museum staff. But we want to make some smart decisions here to make sure some of the color and texture and richness of the garden at the ground plane is brought back into this rehabilitation plan. Next slide, please. I think the next slide will show us some of the plant types that we're considering using here. On the left-hand side, you can see a ring of native ground cover that will navigate those steep slopes from the adjacent streets down to the lagoon. We're thinking that it's quite appropriate to replace those lawns, which are very difficult and unsafe to maintain, with ground covers that are quite low maintenance, but will bring some of that color and texture back. And then on the right-hand side, you can see we're calling this the aquatic edge. There's a planted buffer between the walkways around the lagoon and the lagoon masonry itself. And we want to bring back some plant material, woody plant material, in that location to make sure that users of the Fine Arts Garden aren't able to easily walk right out to the very edge of the lagoon and walk along that masonry, and prevent the Canadian geese from having a superhighway from their landing spot in the lagoon back up into the landscape to do the damage that we know that they do there. Next slide, please. We're also proposing a series of shrubs and woody ground covers to frame those two new oval spaces that flank the mall and wrap the Zodiac Garden and Mall with this much more kind of dense and lush landscape that was part of the original design intent of the Fine Arts Garden. And then in very key locations, we are proposing a series of perennial beds dotted through the mall and Zodiac Garden and up near the museum terraces and dining terrace as ways to really, create some focal points that were original again to the 1928 garden, but have not been part of the gardens in many years because of the maintenance requirements of the perennial beds. And so we are actively in talks with the museum to make sure that our design and the maintenance regime are in line, so that when anything that we're presenting here and ultimately implementing has a plan in place for maintenance that would be at the same level as the quality of maintenance and management of the museum itself. Next slide, please. I already mentioned a little bit about the trees, but again, we're just being very selective about our adjustments to the tree canopy. Generally, the quality and size of the trees is really good here. The museum has done a great job at managing the health of those trees over the last 100 years. There are a handful of trees that are original to the garden, but the majority of these trees are in fact replacements of original trees over the course of the last 100 years. And then highlighted here in some of the pink color, the yellow color, and the purple color are new tree species, native flowering trees, to replace some of the more exotic or invasive trees that were planted in the 1920s. Of course, at that point, we didn't know they were invasive, but we'll be replacing a lot of those trees with similar forms, shapes, and flowering with native plants in the future condition as well. And we're also trying to do that in a way that's not going to detract from the great visitation to the gardens during the cherry tree blossoms in late April and early May. In fact, some of the colored trees here that you see on this plan will have different bloom times to hopefully draw those same visitors back in June and July and August and September for viewing of other blooms throughout the gardens and throughout the calendar year. Next slide, please. I also noted up front that there's a lot of infrastructure upgrades, and this just starts to identify our understanding of the pervious impervious calculations. We've already previewed our project with the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District and with Cuyahoga Soil and Water, and we have a very clear understanding from them what the requirements are going to be for water quality and water quantity measures, and we've baked that into our initial plans here, and we'll continue to develop that as part of our design development on the scope areas A and B that we're actively working on today. And then for storm drainage, we are essentially going to remove or abandon the entire storm drainage system in the gardens and replace it with a new storm drainage system that's connected to those water quality measures that we know are going to be a requirement for the project. Next slide, please. And so with that, we'll end with just a handful of images that we prepared at the end of schematic design to just start to illustrate at a conceptual level what the scale and character of some of these spaces, contemporary spaces in particular, will be in their relationship to the historic axis of the Fine Arts Garden in those more formal spaces of the mall, the Zodiac Garden, and the museum terraces to the very north of this image. So on this plan, you can see, again, everything within that historic core will be picked up and reset in terms of the sandstone paving and some of the marble paving. The fountain in the center of the Zodiac Garden will also be completely dismantled and shipped off site for conservation and then brought back and reassembled during the construction process. And then the landscape along the very edges of the formal landscape will be rehabilitated as well, with a lot of that color and texture being brought back in and framing these openings of the east and west ovals, which will be new program spaces for passive recreation, potentially for additional permanent art or sculpture in the landscape, maybe even environmental art locations and other passive programming as other ways to activate the Fine Arts Garden in a contemporary way. And then the next slide will move up, I think, back towards the museum terraces. Actually, before we do that, this is just one example. This is the East Oval. So this is the oval that's to the east of the mall, just between the mall and East Boulevard. You can start to see the scale of the space and the notion that it's a clearing in the woodland that creates that strong volume framing them all. That's just to the right of this image here. And then on the next slide, I think we'll move back towards the museum to look at a couple improvements to accessibility here on the east side. So this is the east terraces along the south facade of the museum. We're standing here on East Boulevard looking west towards the south facade of the building. And you can see we're presented today with a series of staircases that makes access to the main terrace of the museum, where the Thinker statue is, inaccessible. And on the next click, you'll see that we're proposing to reconstruct this east terrace to make it completely accessible with no barriers or stairs for visitors to be able to easily access the central terrace of the south facade. And then I think the next slide, we're going to shift to the western edge of the museum, looking back in the opposite direction. So here we're in the gardens, looking back towards East Boulevard. And you can see a new west terrace that we're proposing here, just in the center of your screen. This west terrace doesn't really have a program yet, but we've always imagined it as an outdoor lounge space, potentially with a grab-and-go kiosk for coffee and prepackaged foods, or something like that. And then when you walk through the marble threshold there up towards the south facade of the building, the only improvements really that are being proposed there are new plantings in those plant beds, and then restoration and relighting of the south facade of the museum. And then just downhill from this, as we pivot to the left, on the next slide, you'll see the new dining terrace in concept. And the new dining terrace is intended to be an extension of the restaurant program in the museum itself, where this dining terrace would be a private dining terrace that would be accessible by reservation only through the operations of the restaurant within the museum itself. And so this wouldn't be something that you walk up to from the gardens. This would be something that you come in to the restaurant and you're walked out to your table for dining service out here at the dining terrace. And the idea here is that we want that quality of experience and the immersive quality to be similar to standing in front of a Joan Mitchell painting, for example, in the museum, where you could walk outside and have dinner in the middle of a Joan Mitchell-inspired perennial garden that wraps the dining terrace here on the west side of the museum. And so I think that might be our last slide. Oh, actually, I'll wrap up by just identifying that we developed a series of schematic design conceptual costs for those scope areas. And when we presented this to the museum at the end of last year, we determined that at this point in time, we could take scope areas A and B into the design development phase, and we've deferred areas C and D until a future phase of work, which will be dependent on the status of fundraising. But hopefully, we will finish areas A and B this calendar year, and we could bring that into construction in 2026. And once that construction begins on areas A and B, we'd love to be able to roll right into the design and documentation of areas C and D. But again, that is going to be pending the status of the fundraising efforts by the museum. And so with that, I think we'll wrap up and we can receive any questions or comments.
All right, thank you for the presentation. We'll then move on to Design Review Advisory Committee recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Greater Northeast Historic Design Review Advisory Committee on April 15th. And the committee members discussed the project. They were very happy to see the improvements. They talked about the impacts that the improvements and construction would have on events or public access to the various parts of the gardens, and how long the closures would be for the work that's being proposed. Overall, they were supportive, seeing it move forward, and did have some comments about more seating would be nice around the lagoon.
All right, thank you. And then landmark staff recommendations.
Also me. Thank you, Madam Chair. So staff is noting that the landscape master plan was presented to the Cleveland Landmarks Commission on May 9th, 2019. And so previously reviewed, and this kind of proposal moving forward is in line with what was already reviewed. And so we're happy to see it moving forward, and yeah, look forward to the comments and seeing it develop.
Excellent. Thank you. Then we'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. All right, I'll start us off. I think seeing this back in 2019 and seeing it return, it's exciting to see that it's moving forward. I do appreciate the focus on the landscape and really trying to restore what was previously planned for this area. And I do appreciate the most the creation of the outdoor rooms within the park, so that it takes a larger scale and makes it more personable. So I do appreciate everything that we're doing within the master plan, and look forward to seeing it move forward. And also the ADA accessibility, since that is something that's needs to be addressed, which wasn't a priority when this was created. But trying to weave those two priorities together, the restoration, but also creating the ADA access. So overall, I'm in full support of the project. Other questions and comments from the commission? All right. Oh, Ms. Anderson. I can't see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I really appreciate seeing the restoration, the planned restoration of the garden. I'm glad that we're making the walks more accessible. And I'm really happy to hear about the restoration, especially of the Zodiac Garden. I know a lot of the elements are, in pretty sorry condition, and I'm glad that this is being addressed. So I'm very excited to see this project.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any other questions or comments from the commission? Right, not seeing any. Do you feel between what you received at the local and then, I guess my comments, do you feel like you received enough feedback to continue the development of your design?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. We look forward to seeing this move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our schematic design plan reviews for today. We'll then move on to landmark nominations, Cleveland landmark nominations.
Madam Chair, I don't recuse, but want to thank the team for getting us here.
Thank you, Mr. Bulick. All right, feel free to come forward. Everybody. Hello.
You want to just pass there you go.
Excellent. Well, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
That's more schematics. You can just talk to us.
Okay.
The microphone will pick you up so people online can hear also.
All right. Thank you all for having us today. I'm Samaria Rice. I am the mother of Tamir Rice and the founder and CEO of the Tamir Rice Foundation. We are here today to talk about the Tamir Rice Butterfly Memorial, which means a lot to me. Of course, you all know what happened to Tamir at the end of 2014. In November, his life was fatally taken by Cleveland police. And here we have a situation in 11-acre Cadell Park. This is 1/4 acre memorial commemorates Tamir Rice, my son, a 12-year-old African-American boy who was shot and killed by Cleveland police in 2014 while playing at the park. After Tamir's death, the community created, I'm sorry, slide 1, or is it 1, 2? Okay. Okay. So like I was saying, after Tamir's death, the community created an improper memorial at the park's gazebo. If you look in the slide, it's time 3. Next slide. Okay. Thank you. One more. Okay, slide one more time. Thank you. Okay. This was replaced in 2015 by the original butterfly garden designed by Molly Nagin, who was at the time our vice president at the Tamir Rice Foundation. The Tamir Rice, next slide, sorry. The butterfly garden was created in community members as children from the school in honor of Tamir. And those, of course, are some of Tamir's friends at the time. It was a labor of love intended to help the community heal and move forward after the tragic event. Next slide. And you all hear from Nikki next.
Next slide, please. In 2022, under the direction of Tamir's mother, Ms. Rice, the memorial was renovated and expanded into a butterfly-shaped memorial designed by landscape architect Diane Jones Allen of Design Jones LLC with local firm Daru Landscape Architects. Next slide, please. More than 250 people attended the ribbon cutting ceremony, including 10 families of police murder from throughout the state and country, U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown and his wife and journalist Connie Schultz, Ohio State Senator Nikki Antonio, and Cleveland City Councilwoman Jenny Spencer. Next slide, please. The memorial features planting beds, curvilinear paths composed of brick pavers, resin, and marble, and 2 plaques installed flush with the ground plane. Next slide, please. One panel made of polished black granite features an engraved portrait of Tamir. Next slide, please. The other panel is dedicated to Tamir's sister, Tajay Rice, who at the age of 14 tried to come to her brother's aid and was tackled and improperly detained by Cleveland police. Next slide, please. The brick path is interspersed with butterfly mosaics crafted by local artist Angelica Pozo. Next slide, please. Simply designed black stone benches edge the memorial, allowing visitors a place to sit and contemplate the commemorative space. Next slide, please. The memorial is located in Cadell Park, which has been part of the Clifton and West Boulevard Historic District since the year 2000. Next slide. Originally called the West Boulevard Allotment Subdivision, it was a carefully planned neighborhood within Cleveland's Parks and Boulevard system, an ambitious idea to connect Cleveland parks with wide boulevards and parkways. Next slide, please. Cadell Commons Park was donated to the city in 1906 by renowned Cleveland architect Frank E. Cadell, who is also the namesake for the Cadell neighborhood. After his death, a clock tower was constructed in his honor by his widow and still stands in the park today, just a few hundred feet from the Rice Butterfly Memorial.
Next slide. The shooting death of 12-year-old Tamir Rice in 2014 brought increased attention to the national debate on interactions between police officers and African Americans. Several hundred protests gathered in downtown Cleveland on November 25th, 2014, and on multiple occasions since in response to both Rice killing and the lack of justice for those responsible. Next slide. Tamir was a beloved member of the Cadell neighborhood. He attended Marion C. Seltzer Elementary School, took classes at the Cadell Fine Arts Center, and was well known at Cadell Recreation Center. Where he will often spend time playing basketball and other sports with his friends. His death sent shockwaves through the community, and the Rice Butterfly Memorial has become a sacred space for people to come and reflect on his life and try to find answers and peace to move forward. Thank you.
There are just a few more slides.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And as you can see, this was the Memorial Commemoration Day that we did for Tamir. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We truly appreciate it and for coming in person.
Yeah.
We will then move on to landmark staff recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a very special presentation, a very special landmark nomination, and it is a bit different than some of the other ones we see for it's not over 50 years old, which is the kind of, it's historic, but it's also located already in an already existing historic district. Now we do have examples of sites or buildings or commemorative items that are located within designated historic districts that maybe were designated by our commission prior to the district being created, vice versa, that rise separate to the context of why that particular district was designated, and so deserve to have their own kind of context created for their own specific landmark. One thing is history is not just a set thing in the past, but it's constantly happening, constantly evolving. And so looking at the kind of nomination criteria that we have set as our commission, staff thought that it fit under the criteria that it's a location or is a site of a significant historic event. The historic property exemplifies the cultural, economic, social, or historic heritage of the city. And the property's location or its singular physical characteristics represent the establishment or familiar visual feature of a neighborhood, community, or city. Now, this is a site of an event, and the Landmarks Commission does have a few sites that are already landmarked, like Moses Cleveland Landing site, site of the original log cabin, and also has nominated sites or commemorative items in the past. So we don't have a lot of them, but we do have them, and so there is already a precedent established for the designation of a site instead of a physical building per our commission. And so landmark staff thinks that this does fit the criteria for a nomination. We look forward to discussion, and this did receive support from Council Member Jenny Spencer. Her statement is that she enthusiastically supports the landmarks designation for the Tamir Rice Butterfly Memorial.
Excellent. Thank you for that recommendation. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Director?
Thank you for the presentation and the project and your patience in waiting for us. I'm sorry that you have to be here today for this, but this is really beautiful. I think it's nice to reflect on the significance of place, and especially the significance of this place in Tamir's life and that of your family. And the fact that this can be here for his friends and students at the school. I know this area is going through a lot of transformation as well. And so I appreciate, I think the gazebo itself is now in DC, right?
It's
Or
in
somewhere
Chicago.
else. Chicago. Okay.
Yeah, it's at the Art Bank. If you are familiar with the Astor Gates, he is preserving it for me.
Okay.
Yes.
So I appreciate that there's something still in this place to commemorate that and to offer some healing and beauty for folks who are still working through that. So thanks for the project. Thanks for being here, and thanks for continuing to engage in the community and build on Tamir's legacy.
Thank you. Thank you to the city. I don't know if the city is in here, but if the city is in here. Thank you for the city and the commissioners today. And in considering this project, just understand that this is a sacred place for me and my family to come to. And this is the last memory that I have of my son. So I hope that you all will take that in consideration. Thank you.
Well, I would echo what Director Mercerman said. I think this is, it's a wonderful commemoration to an event that is located and allows people to appreciate and connect to it by its location next to the school also. So I'm in full support of the nomination.
Thank you.
Other questions and comments from the commission? All right, then would someone like to make a motion of support for nomination?
A motion to nominate.
No, motion to nominate. Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to nominate
All right, thank
this
you.
as a
Thank you.
Cleveland local landmark.
All right, thank you, Mr. Samberry. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, thank you, Director. Do we have a second? Any further discussion? Not seeing any. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Dulick recused himself. Councilmember Gray had to step out. Director Mersman?
Yes.
Mr. Samberry?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Trosick?
Yes.
Dr. Williams had to step out as well, and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of, 7-0 with one recusal.
All right, well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Oh, peace and blessings, everybody.
Thank you.
I appreciate y'all. Y'all all have a blessed day.
Thank you, you too.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll then move on to our next applicant for Cleveland Landmark nomination, the Greater, sorry, I have a blurry right now, New Calvary Baptist Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to invite our guests up.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Almost afternoon.
Oh, yes, yeah. No, almost.
So the property that we're speaking about is in the South Collinwood Census District. Collinwood is split between East Cleveland and Euclid Townships. It is named for Charles Collins, who was the chief engineer for the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railroad for 30 years. And although the name Collinsville appears on the 1874 map, it was quickly changed as there was already a Collinsville in Ohio, 8 miles east of Oxford. Had its own train stop as well. The Encyclopedia of Cleveland History notes that in 1874, at least 500 engineers, firemen, brakemen, conductors, and other employees made their headquarters near the rail yards in this area to handle the 72 freight trains arriving daily. As the railroad grew, so did the village of Collinwood, with its population reaching about 3,200 by the 1890s. The congregation was founded as an outgrowth of the Free Congregational Church of Collimer, East Cleveland, with 18 charter members. Ford Chapel was named in honor of Horatio Ford, and although those records were not specific, it is believed that it was named after Horatio Cyrus Ford, who had died in 1876, not long after the founding of the church. His son was Horatio Clark Ford. That's why there's those different ones. And you can see it there circled in red. Is not too far from where they were originally located, or they moved to. It only took 2 years to construct the building. It is in the Romanesque Revival style with an Akron plan layout, and the dedication service September 29th, 1895, with a seating capacity of 600. The architect was William Warren Sabin. He was active in Cleveland for more than 3 decades. He has more than 50 buildings currently attributed to him, with the First Church of Christ, Euclid, Ohio, aka the First United Presbyterian Church of East Cleveland, the Henry Grave House in Sandusky, and the Dr. William Gifford House here in Cleveland, listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Bolton Avenue Presbyterian Church, now known as Antioch Baptist Church, is a designated Cleveland landmark and was completed immediately before First Collinwood in 1894. Collinwood was annexed by the city of Cleveland in 1910. The church incorporated as the Collinwood Congregational Church, and eventually they wanted to build a gymnasium, so they wanted to expand the property next door. There was an addition in 1913 and an alteration in 1914, but those permits are missing. And unfortunately, the permit for the gym is also missing. However, the church records mention the architect's name once. Architect is Herman Maurer. He was born in Cleveland and graduated from the Case School of Applied Sciences in 1907. He has designed nearly 24 churches that we've found thus far, including Cleveland Landmarks Emmanuel Presbyterian, First Hungarian Reformed, and one of our more recent ones, the East Glenville Methodist Episcopal Church, which he designed with his partner. At the golden anniversary of the Congregational Church, there were 500 members and 600 attending Sunday school. In 1936, the YMCA began using the parish house and gymnasium for their facilities. This arrangement would continue until 1957, until they moved to new facilities around the corner. In 1957, there was also changes within the church community, as there was a merger of 3 different conventions coming together to form the United Church of Christ. It took several years to complete this merger, and then in 1961, the name changed officially to the Collinwood United Church of Christ. That same year, Reverend Dwayne L. Day was installed as pastor. Day would be a part of the civil rights activities in the area that would affect the church long term. And I'm going to give a very brief history, because there's very much complex things going on in the civil rights history, and I cannot even begin to touch. I just need to give a very basic overview of this, so please excuse the brevity of this. Cleveland Historical notes that the Near East side of the city was slated for urban renewal in the 1950s, which forced tens of thousands of African Americans further east into neighborhoods near Collinwood. This is also coupled with the second Great Migration of Southern Blacks and Appalachian whites. Collinwood experienced extreme demographic changes that led to increased racial conflicts at the time. The landmark case of Brown versus the Board of Education ruling in 1954 ended legal segregation in the education system, asserting that separate could never be equal, and mandated desegregation of public schools in America. The busing of Black children to white receiving schools showed protests from both Black and white parents. Reverend Day was an ardent supporter of civil rights and school integration, was a member of the Emergency Clergymen's Committee for Civil Rights, serving on its executive board, formed about 1964. The school integration issue reached a breaking point in April of that year with the accidental death of Reverend Bruce Clunder, who was crushed by a bulldozer at the construction site of the elementary school on Lakeview Road. The Clergymen's Committee included about 230 Protestant and Jewish clergymen in the greater Cleveland area. Dr. Jeffrey K. Haddon noted in his book, The Gathering Storm in the Churches, 1969, that at least a dozen of them lost their pulpits due to their involvement, including Day. Day tendered his resignation in an effort to keep the congregation together, but with everything happening in the neighborhood, it was too late. A report by the Collinwood Community Service Center noted 90% of the population of South Collinwood was ethnic Europeans and about 5 to 10% Black in 1965. By 1968, they estimated that the Black population had grown to 30%, the ethnic population fallen to 40%, and Appalachian whites had established themselves with 30% of the population. The church lost membership quickly. In 1962, the church had 479 members. By 64, it was down to 298 with a weekly attendance of about 52. Following the annual meeting in January 1966, the trustees noted some of the issues facing the future. Members were leaving the neighborhood and transferring to other churches. They were aging out, as there was only 4 members in attendance under the age of 30. There was an increase in churches in their census tract. The expenses were exceeding the income, and as noted by one member, the church was in the throes of what was happening across the country as being in a changing neighborhood and not changing with it. In an effort to continue, they investigated the possibility of merging with another congregation, and after 9 months, it came down to one possibility: Grace United Church on Westrop Avenue, but the Wood congregation would have to move there. On January 18th, 1967, the membership voted overwhelmingly to disband, with the final day being March 31st. The property transferred to the Western Reserve Association of the United Church of Christ. In March of 1968, the building became the site of the Collinwood Multi-Service Center, funded by a 3-year grant from the Greater Cleveland Foundation, and this housed offices for the various agencies seen here. This facility and other service centers became an important support center as in May 1968, Mayor Carl B. Stokes launched the Cleveland Now initiative. This was to be a 10 to 12-year program designed to cure the physical and social ills, including housing, jobs, and health, remaking Cleveland into a thoroughly livable city. In 1971, at the end of this 3-year grant term, the now named Collinwood Community Service Center moved to 741 East 153rd Street. 1971 was also a new beginning for the property. On January 3rd, a new congregation was formed. The day began with a Sunday school class and a morning sermon, and everyone reassembled in the afternoon to organize a church. It was during this meeting that Greater New Calvary was named, and Minister H.H. Hardy was called to be the pastor. There are 2 deeds later in 1971 transferring the property to the new congregation, and less than a decade later, they were able to burn the mortgage. The congregation has been together for more than 50 years. They provide for the community with their food pantry and clothing programs. For a number of years, they also housed the South and West Community Center, providing a safe place for the youth of the neighborhood to participate in supervised activities while the Collinwood Recreation Center was in development. Collinwood Recreation opened in 2012, but the facility continued until the COVID pandemic in 2020. Music has always been a large part of the congregation. There have been at least 7 different choirs throughout the years. Significance, its character, interest, or value as part of development of the neighborhood. Architecturally, it's also involved with 2 noted Cleveland architects who have many other high standards. And it is a familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. Tour of the current conditions. And there's the house there as well. It's a historic truck, isn't it? The interior maintains its integrity very well. You can see this is where the Akron plan comes in. You can see there's the sliding partitions that separate the Sunday school from the main, and then they can open it up again for services later. The 2 stained glass windows, Nella Morgan, 1876 to 1937. Didn't have much information on her. I know her family is from Ashtabula. She and they are all buried. Did not find any connection to the church, except that her mother's funeral was there as well. In 1923, J. Odell, however, was a member of the church and was involved in the temperance movement, including a stint as the president of the Ohio State Anti-Liquor Alliance, and was a member of the Prohibition Party, which for trivia purpose is the oldest existing third party in the United States and the 3rd longest active political party since 1869. There are references to him being active as an abolitionist movement and including possibly being a part of the Underground Railroad, and he died in 1908. There's the gymnasium. So some sources, and special thanks Ms. Kane here for all of her work that got a lot of this to me, so made my job a little bit easier. And then, thank you.
Sorry, my name is Gay Kane, and this is my pastor, Larry Wood Knight, and we're here because we're kind of partial to the nomination, of course. But at the same time, we just wanted to emphasize a few points. Like when people think of a church, they think of a sanctuary of peace, a hospital for sinners, of refuge. And that's all fine and well, and that's what we want to do. But historically, the Black church goes a step further by providing support and direction for African Americans. And since 1893, our church as a structure has been a gathering place for any ethnicity to worship and fellowship with others. A landmark identifies a stage in history, and our church has been here since 1893 to help the residents of the city of Cleveland grow physically with recreational and food outreach programs and spiritually in their Christian faith. That is why I'm speaking on behalf of the church, and we desire this nomination so we can continue that effort here in the city of Cleveland. That's all I wanted to say.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
What she said.
All right. Excellent. Thank
He
you.
do enough speaking on Sundays.
Nice to take a break sometimes, right? We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments.
Yes,
Oh,
before
sorry,
we get into
landmark
that,
staff
yeah,
recommendation,
staff
sorry.
did just want to, we do recommend nominating this property. As you can see on the kind of checklist we went through, there are a number of our criteria that it kind of tags those bases. So yeah, Landmarks staff is in support of the nomination.
Excellent. And have we heard from the council person?
Yes, yeah, I apologize. And Council Member Anthony Harrison is in support of the designation as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Now we'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Well, I guess I'll start us off. That, you know, I think this is a beautiful structure. It's obviously has been cared for very well, and that says a lot about your community and the community at large. I think I'm in full support of it based on its history and obviously the care that's been taken care of it and the care that you have, stated also. So I'm in full support of the nomination. Other questions and comments from the commission? Right, not seeing any. Would someone like to make a motion for nomination?
I'm going to nominate.
Right, we have a motion. Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Sandberg. Any further discussion? All right, that's me. Mr. Muslim, please call roll.
And Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick. Yes. Director Mersman,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberg.
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion to nominate passes unanimously.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Thanks.
Don't forget your phone.
Yes, thank you. Steve, he's been diligently working on, we done tried to do this many times, we kept running the brick wall, but Steve is big to it, she kept at it. I thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless you all. God bless you, your children, and your children's children.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our Cleveland Landmark nominations. We're then going to move on to our National Registry of Historic Place nominations. Unfortunately, I do need to step out. Mr. Strickland, can you please take over as chair?
Certainly.
I can ask. Yes?
Sure.
All right, Mr. Strickland is on to continue on. So thank you. I'll step out then.
So we'll move on to our next agenda items. Are we set to go? Okay. Next agenda item is the National Register of Historic Places nomination, Ohio Historic Site Preservation Advisory Board from June 13th or to be presented on June 13th, 2025. First, Evangelical Church at 12305 Arlington Avenue, Ward 10. Could the presenter please present information on your project?
Good morning, Landmarks Commission. This is Margaret Land with the Cleveland Restoration Society. I apologize, I don't seem to be able to turn on my video at the moment. But thank you for taking a look at our nominations. This and the next are both part of an underrepresented communities grant through the National Park Service. And I do believe that Pastor Wade was planning to join this morning. He's current pastor at Greater Friendship Baptist Church. So next slide, please. So the church is being nominated under criteria C for architecture. It was completed in 1926 with the Gothic Revival style and a Jacobean style educational wing. The architect was John William Creswell Corbusier, considered a master ecclesiastical architect by the time of his early death in 1928. He had completed at least 30 churches in Northeast Ohio and actually outside of the state. His masterpiece is considered the Church of the Savior in Cleveland Heights. And his work at First Evangelical is still very much today as it was in 1926. Next slide, please. You can see we have a comparison of historic photos from the early days of the First Evangelical Church to how the church stands today under the stewardship of Greater Friendship Baptist Church. And much of it is retained, beautiful woodwork, historic light fixtures, very minimal changes. Go ahead, next slide, please. The north transept of the church extends into the education wing. It has an element of an Akron plan. There are sliding panels that could separate this education wing or open it up to the worship space. Next slide, please. In the lower basement level, there's a dining room still intact with a full kitchen beyond. Next slide, please. One of the wonderful, unique elements of the church, I've seen other churches in the Cleveland area that were designed with these bowling alleys for recreation in the basement. This is one of the few that I've been into that elements of that still exist. It would need to be refurbished and brought back, but it is really special and unique that that bowling alley still is in the basement at Greater Friendship. Next slide, please. And the gymnasium, which is located to the, get my directions confused, northeast, I believe, of the building, still also very much intact. Next slide, please. In addition to being nominated for its architecture, the building is also being nominated under criteria A for the broad pattern of historic events. In 1969, the church sold from First Evangelical to the Greater Friendship Baptist Church. Greater Friendship Baptist congregation formed in 1955 and participated in various civil rights events. Within this church, it hosted things like voter registration drives, and Martin Luther King Sr. came to speak at the church in 1975. The church was designated as a Cleveland landmark in 1995. Next slide, please. The nomination also calls out specifically the installation of these beautiful stained glass windows. The church hired artist Douglas Phillips, who was the only African-American to operate his own stained glass studio known in the Cleveland area, perhaps in the country, between 1952 and 1995. These windows would have been among his last commission, being installed the same year as his death. They're very unique. If you go to the next slide, you'll see in the tripartite windows that we saw there, they all feature secular history figures from history, but up to modern day, from the African-American community, Dr. Martin Luther King, and members of civil rights during the civil rights movement. There's Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass. There's the first woman astronaut to go into space. I mean, a real variety of figures from the Black community in history. And then if you go to the next slide, in the south transept, there is this amazing risen Christ. One of the themes of Douglas Phillips' work is this risen Christ, but this is the only one that we know of, and his daughter has done quite a bit of research, that is an African-American Christ. And you can see the continent of Africa pictured there. It also has elements that correspond to both the church's interest and Douglas Phillips' interest in things like music. There's instruments and things within this stained glass work. And so this is called out specifically as a special layer, even though it's not at the 50-year mark, but this layer of cultural heritage that's been added to the church. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the building stands today as being something that's architecturally significant, designed by Corbusier, and then that added layer of the stained glass by Douglas Phillips, and tells the story of both an immigrant and migrant history because of its ties to the original Protestant German American congregation that built the church, and then the continued stewardship of Greater Friendship Baptist that goes on through today. I don't know if Pastor Wade was able to join us, if he'd like to say anything. All right, so that is the nomination for First Evangelical Greater Friendship Baptist Church.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. So Dan, does this go before the design review committee?
No, this doesn't go to the design review since it's just a National Register nomination. So we're really just looking for a motion to support the nomination to be passed on to the Ohio Historic Site Preservation Advisory Board that meets in June. I guess I just say that staff is supportive of the nomination, and we concur with Cleveland Restoration Society's assessment and application of the National Register criteria. So, we'd welcome a motion to support the nomination.
All right. Before we ask for a motion, I wonder if any of my fellow commission members have any questions or comments with regard to the nomination. I don't see any online, and so I'm assuming that there's no comments from in the room. I think this is a wonderful church, and the stained glass is it's spectacular. So with that, I will open it up for a motion to support the nomination.
I move to support the nomination.
Thank you, Director. Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Sandberg. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Dan, please call the roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dreyer?
Yes.
Director Mersman?
Yes.
Mr. Sandberg?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Trasick?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the motion passes unanimously.
All right. Wonderful. Looking forward to having the nomination presented at the meeting in June. All right, and I have lost my agenda here, but I know that there's another the Emmanuel Baptist Church at 7901 Quincy Ave is also proposed for nomination to the historic Ohio Register or National Register. Could the applicant please present your project?
All right. Another really interesting history here with the Emmanuel Baptist Church. It's also being nominated both under criteria C for its architecture and criteria A for the historic events. Next slide, please. So the church itself was founded in 1916 and moved into what was the Madison Avenue Congregational Church building a year later in 1917. Madison Avenue is now East 79th Street, so located in at the same corner lot where Emmanuel Baptist is today at Quincy and East 79th. Tragedy struck in 1939 when this church building burnt to the ground. At the time, the pastor, Reverend Lawson, pictured here, really was committed to rebuilding the church, despite many of his congregation wanting to just move and find a new home. But he had a vision of building what he said was the first church by and for African Americans. So he looked to congregants of the church to construct the new building. Next slide, please. So in 1939, the congregation did proceed, those that stayed, because I think they lost about half their congregation with this decision. They proceeded to hire architect Ralph Lawrence. He's a little known architect in Cleveland. He was also a minister, and I don't know if the religious connection had anything to do with the hiring. But he did the initial design for the church, but it took, because of challenges and the war, it took a long time to complete this structure. And the architect Ralph Lawrence passed away in 1944, and the building had just had the basement level completed at that point. So then Junior Everhard, another local architect, was hired to revise the plans and oversee the continued construction of this church. But outside of these architects, the church, there were no registered Black architects at the time. So they were working with white architects in Cleveland. But outside of those gentlemen, the church really looked to Black laborers, several of whom were from their own congregation, to construct the building. Next slide, please. So Arthur Bussey, who oversaw and was responsible for constructing the Myrtle Highview Historic District that's in the Lisaville neighborhood, he was a member of this church. And so he was hired as a master builder. He'd done architectural drafting and really oversaw the construction. And then they hired as many other laborers in the trades, electricians, mechanical engineers, etc., that they could, many of whom were members of the church. And so as far as the church states and what we have agree with is that it's considered to be the first church fully built by and for African Americans in Cleveland. Next slide, please. I mentioned that it took a long time to complete and that there were delays because of the war period. And you can see on the outside of the church, when they first completed the basement level and the entry, the earlier brick was actually darker. And the newspaper accounts speak of the church worshiping in that basement space for quite a while before the rest of the building was completed. Another interesting thing is when we look at the plans that we have from the architect Junior Everhard, there was an education wing designed, but then it's crossed out. And so the church moved forward with completing the sanctuary and really just the sanctuary and basement level spaces initially. Next slide, please. You can see a view of the interior here, what that building, when it was completed in 1949, It was basically the sanctuary and then the lower basement level. Next slide, please. And then in 1956, the church hired the relatively newly formed firm of Madison and Madison architects and engineers to design the education wing. So in contrast to something that was originally planned to be more in keeping with the architectural style of the initial building, that was changed, and Robert Madison designed what is now the education wing on the building. Next slide, please. So this was done within about 2 years of Madison becoming the first registered Black architect in Cleveland. And I imagine is one of the earlier commissions of the firm. Next slide, please. So while the church was really, leading this major construction project in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, they were also very much involved with the civil rights movement up through the 1970s. So Reverend Lawson, that was responsible for the rebuilding vision of the church, is pictured on the left there. He was active in the Baptist Ministers Conference, met with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And then following him was Reverend Sterling Glover, who he was president of the United Pastors Association and also very much involved with the civil rights movement. I think that the whole concept of, making opportunity for employment within the Black community was a very strong and key piece of the construction of the church. And then Reverend Sterling Glover continued that idea of using the church's mission as a platform to increase employment opportunities and services in the neighborhood. He established what did not work out in the end, but for several years was known as the Emmanuel Care Center, located on Carnegie Avenue, with this vision of increasing opportunities for Black employment in healthcare while also serving the needs of the community with a senior healthcare center. Next slide, please. And so for these reasons, the building is nominated to the National Register with this legacy of being the first church in Cleveland built by and for African Americans, and acknowledging that leadership continued to seek ways to improve employment opportunities in the community, pursue economic equity, and that, of course, has galvanized the role of Emmanuel Baptist Church in the historic fight for civil rights here in Cleveland.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation. Is there any other members of the church present that would like to?
Yes, thank you. I believe Pastor Cobb is here.
Yes, I am. Good morning, everyone. And I want to just thank you, first of all, for your consideration, and thank you, Cleveland Landmarks Commission, for your time in listening to us today. Emmanuel is an awesome church where we like to say where everybody is somebody and God is with us. And so we appreciate you taking the time to consider us for this nomination. And again, we want to just let you know that I am on today as the fourth of only 4 pastors in the church's history. And we're getting ready to celebrate 110 years on next year in February. And so for those reasons and all the wonderful things that Margaret put out today, we ask for your consideration for nomination. And thank you so much for this time.
All right. Thank you, Pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So Dan, you have a staff recommendation?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, staff again, concurs with Cleveland Restoration Society's assessment and application of the criteria, and we would recommend a motion to support the nomination at the Ohio Historic Site Preservation Advisory Board meeting.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll open it up to any questions or comments from the commission. All right, seeing none, hearing none, I'll just comment that, again, I think this is a very worthwhile nomination, and it's just fascinating to hear about the history of the church and its mission in supporting the African American community. All right, any other comments or questions? If not, I'll open it up to a motion to support the nomination.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to support the nomination to the National Register Board.
Thank you, Mr. Sandberry. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. This is Michelle Anderson.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Dr. Mersman,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Tresick,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, the motion to support the nomination passes unanimously.
wonderful. Looking forward to having the church designated as on the National Register. Thank you very much. That concludes our nomination process. As part of the agenda, we'll move on to approval of meeting minutes. So if there's no discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of November 14th and December 12th, 2024.
I move that we approve the minutes from November 14th and December 12th, 2024.
Ms. Anderson, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Sandberry. We have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Dan, please call the roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Director Mersman,
Abstain?
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Tresick,
Yes.
and Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the vote passes by a vote of 4-0 with one abstention.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to administrative reports.
No real administrative reports this week or meeting, so.
The second meeting minutes.
What's that?
Did we approve both meeting minutes?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, both were approved in one
Obviously
motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no real report, just that our next meeting is May 22nd.
All right. With that, we'll move to close the commission meeting for May 8th and look forward to seeing everyone on May 22nd.
All right, thank you.
With that, we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.